Welcome everybody to my podcast, Big Little Small Talk. I'm Megan O'Hara-Sullivan and I love to talk, but I also love to listen. If you're new here, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome along to the Big Little Small Talk. I have the pleasure today of being out in Clifton at the Lone Eagle Flying School, and I'm interviewing Trevor Bange, who's going to say whether it's Bange or Bange and clear that up once and for all, and tell me all about the idea of a flying school and what their sentiments are and why they want to promote aviation, particularly for young people and for women. And I've also got a special guest who's a lady, Carol, who is learning how to fly at the moment. She's going to tell us her story as well. So welcome, Trevor. Welcome
Thank
to
you.
the segment.
Thanks, Megan.
Now, can you tell me, Bange or Bange?
Well, if you're born and bred in this district, it's always been Bange, because Bange is the German pronunciation of the original name. But my father, John, he has always stayed with the terminology of Bange, and that's what I stick with, is the terminology of Bange. When I talk to a local like yourself, I'll say Trevor Bange, because you know who I am. If I say Trevor Bange, you won't know me.
Right.
So when I'm on the phone and I'm answering a local phone call, it's Trevor Bange. So I use both.
Right.
But that's the difference between the two.
It's not your alias, Bange or Bange.
No, it's not.
Okay, so here we are at the beautiful Lone Eagle Flying School. Did you start the school, Trevor?
Oh, not really. This airfield started in 1932 with my father, John Bange. He was flying a primary glider that he built himself, and he flew it off this airfield. Then in 1976, we formed the local Sport Aviation Aircraft Association on the Eastern Darling Downs as a kindred spirit of pilots just wanting to get together as a friendship group. In 2002, I made the fatal mistake of retiring from work, and when I came out here to retire, the member said, well, you've been a flying instructor for years, we want to get a flying school going. 3 months later, we had a flying school here operated by the Lone Eagle Flying School, which was part of the Darling Downs Sport Aircraft Association. So I went from being able to do a 40-hour-week job to doing a 70 to 80-hour-week job.
So,
and 7 days a week.
And 7 days a week. So you live on site as well?
That's right.
Yeah. And when you said you came out here, what sort of work had you been doing before?
I've lived in Toowoomba for 40 years and worked at Bailey Henderson Hospital as a nurse.
Oh, as a nurse, wow.
That's right.
Okay, and then you came, and you were flying recreationally with your dad during that time?
And I was also teaching people to fly in gliders out at John Darien at Darling Downs Soaring Club. And the natural thing was to come out here being a power pilot and also a flying instructor. It was very simple for me to just convert across and become an instructor for Recreational Aviation Australia.
Okay, and to start a flying school, tell me about that. How hard and complicated? I can't imagine the red tape.
Red tape, basically we didn't find any. Recreational aviation is so simple. For us, we contacted the head office in Canberra. They had a person who was coming through here a couple of weeks later. He came and had a meeting with our club committee. He talked about what we could do. We then filled in 2 forms, I think it was, and he told me how I could get my licence and get it all approved within a matter of a couple of weeks, which is what happened. And 3 months later, we'd found an aircraft, purchased it, and we had a flying school started. The cost to the club was only a few dollars, really, and virtually no red tape.
Right, that's incredible. I can't imagine that it'd be the same now.
It's not the same now. For a new flying school to get started now, there is a fair bit of paperwork, probably 4 or 5 pages, and the instructors have got to go through a bit more rigorous routine. It's changing times, changing places, and the cost has gone up to, I think it's about $1,400 or $1,500 to start a new flying school, which, when you look at it in comparison to a flying school like, if we take a camp example, the Darling Downs Aero Club in Toowoomba, if you wanted to form a flying school on Toowoomba Aerodrome, the cost would be quite horrendous. I don't want to imagine what it would be, but I don't think you get out of it under $50,000 to $100,000.
And do you own aircraft? You said before you bought an aircraft. The club bought an aircraft, did they?
Yes, the club had no dollars and cents in our pocket, so one of our members loaned us money, and we purchased our first aircraft. In 18 months, we purchased our second aircraft. Then we cross-hired a third aircraft after about 3 years, Now the club actually owns 5 aircraft. We've got 2 drifter aircraft, which are open cockpit aircraft originally made down in the Browne area, and we've got 3 Jabiru aircraft that are made in Bundaberg. So we've tried to stay with Australian made products all the time, and therefore we can get parts easily and look after our Australian personnel.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about the structure of the club. You have a board, is that correct, or a committee?
It's an association. It's a club committee is what we've got, of 8 people, and they run the club as well as they run the school. And people like myself, and we've got another instructor, he's around here at present today. He's also another instructor with us. We all work for the club in a voluntary capacity. We're an all-volunteer club. No staff are paid. All of our engineers are all volunteers, and our other club members also work around the club doing various jobs. It may be maintenance on the airfield, maintenance on the buildings, setting up things. The sky's the limit for jobs, and people come around here and say, what's the jobs? And they point to me and I say, it's amazing how I can find work for people.
Can find a job for anyone.
I can find a job for anyone.
And just before I go, I'm not going off the Lone Eagle, but where did the name, I suppose it's fairly obvious, Lone Eagle, but is there a story behind the name? How did you decide on Lone Eagle?
Yeah, well, there is a bit of a story. Dad had purchased one of his aircraft, which was called a Porterfield, in 1955. And it was a hand-me-down, I suppose you could say, from a person called Sir Reginald Ansett from Ansett Airlines. And he brought that aircraft to here, and one of the things he realised was there was only one of them in the southern hemisphere. And he then coined the name Lone Eagle, and he wrote that on the side of the Porterfield back in about 57, 58. Then when we rebuilt that aircraft in 1996, we put a lot of artwork onto the aircraft, and the only thing we didn't get time to put on by the artist who donated all of his time to do all the artwork was re-establish the name of the aircraft back on its side.
Oh.
And so we lost the name Lone Eagle from this airfield. And one of our committee members at the time when we formed the club, we were saying, well, what name are we going to call the school? What about this? What about that? And he said, well, you've lost the name Lone Eagle. It's disappeared from this airfield. Why don't we call the school Lone Eagle? So we said, yep.
Sounds perfect. Exactly.
Yeah,
that's
and that's
right.
what we've now got.
So, Trevor, tell me about how the airspace works. Do you have to purchase airspace, or how do you stop yourselves running into each other? And how does all of that work if you don't have radio towers, or you do have? Or I'm
well, no, we don't
novice.
have radio towers. The big thing with aviation, in particular around Australia, is what we call free and G, which means we're allowed to fly wherever we like within reason. Free as anything, and to do that we are in airspace called G-class airspace, and all we do is use our number 1 eyeballs for looking out, and we then enhance that lookout by use of the radio to talk and tell people what we're doing, and then other pilots listen to our radio call and see whether or not we could be in conflict with them, and if there is, then we'll communicate with each other.
Mm-hmm.
I flew with our female pilot that you talked about before this morning. She made a number of radio calls. No one answered us at all, and we only heard a limited number of radio calls at the same time. But anyone nearby would have heard her calls and knew that we were flying and what we were doing and exactly where we were. And that's the big thing. It's a bit of awareness.
So let's run this scenario. I'm a person listening to this right now, and I think, I really want to find out about that, and I want to find out about whether I could qualify to be a pilot, or what would I do? Would I just get in touch with you, and how much does it cost, and what's the process of learning to fly?
The best and easiest process is to initially contact us, arrange to come and have what we call a trial introductory flight. It's approximately a half an hour for $100, and then you get to have a briefing by the instructor. You'll then go up with the instructor. He'll let you have a feel of the controls, and he will explain a number of things to you about the aircraft and how it operates, and let you just get your air legs, your air feeling going. After you've had that first flight, then we recommend you go away, have a think about it. The adrenaline could well be running fairly strong in you. Oh, that was fantastic. It was this, like people that jump out of parachutes. Jump out of planes, I should say, in parachutes. They say this.
Who would do something as stupid as
I
that?
know, I've heard of some people doing that. I'm not one for jumping out of planes.
You're
my
one for keeping it.
My female pilot is one who did do it recently.
Is it? Well, we'll talk to Carol in a minute about
That's
that.
right.
But, I just ring
getting
up.
back-
What about if I wanted to buy someone a joy flight, a half an hour joy flight? Would that be the same process? Are you in that business or not really?
Virtually exactly the same, but we do not call them joy flights. A joy flight is something which is a commercial operation where the person comes along and they expect a service for a payment.
Mm-hmm.
And you then got to have certain qualified people. We cannot do that type of work in recreational aviation. To do a joy flight, you need to go to a flying school that's allowed to do it, which is a general aviation flying school like we've got at Toowoomba at the Darling Downs Aero Club. However, what we can do is fairly similar. You come in and you have a trial introductory flight, and whilst you're doing that, you're flying the aircraft, seeing what it's like, but also while you're doing that, you're flying around. If you live nearby, we'll probably find you'll be over the top of your house and you can have a look at your house. Some people have had flights from here where they want a longer flight of about an hour, and they've done a fly where we've gone over Wellcamp Aerodrome around Toowoomba, checked out the bypass road, and then we come back to here. So we can tailor the trial introductory flight to suit what the individual wants.
Perfect.
But you must be involved with flying the aircraft and having a briefing and do all those things.
Okay.
Whereas a joy flight is purely jump in the plane and go, the same as what you are in an airliner.
Yes, I can't imagine how you'd be tempted. You'd have a little... I can remember flying over my place one day. I came out here to see you at an open day, and I got to go up with one of your pilots, Daniel King, and fly over my house, as you say. It was just exhilarating, and I was a bit the same. Okay, I'm going to learn how to fly. You know, it was a bit like when I went for the bike ride. I'm going to learn how to ride a bike and go bike riding. You're on 4DDB, Community Radio, 102.7, and this is a segment called Big Little Small Talk, where we go and talk to someone interesting in the community. And today we're talking to Trevor Bange, who has the Lone Eagle Flying School in Clifton, and a special guest later on, Carol, who's one of his pupils at the moment. So is there a minimum age, Trevor, that you have to be able to learn how to fly?
The minimum age to learn to fly is age that the student is able to interpret what you're saying and comprehend and understand and work things out, and also big enough in stature that they can reach the controls. So what we normally say around about the age of 14 to start.
Mm-hmm.
They can then fly solo on their own at age of 15. If you really push the limit, by the age of 15 and 1 month, they could be flying all over Australia on their own and carrying passengers, maybe carrying mum and dad with them, things like that. At age of 15 and a quarter.
If you're a really smart 8-year-old with really long legs, would that be pushing it too far, do you think?
Yes, it is. You've got a long way to go to get through to being age 15, and you'll find you'll get up to the standard of being able to fly on your own, but you're not allowed to fly on your own. Therefore, you'll get very bored. What it is, I've got to do this again, and there's no stimulus to keep the person advancing forwards is the big thing. Yeah. And that's why I say to people, hold off 13 and a half, 14, and then introduce them through that next 12 to 18 months,
mm-hmm.
and then they learn to fly, and then they're right to go when they're age 15.
Mm-hmm.
One of our pilots just the other day went solo on his 15th birthday out of the gliding club at John Darien.
Oh, how beautiful.
He'd done some of his training here, and he'd won a scholarship, and he went out to John Darien. He's very small in stature, and he's got through, and went solo on his 15th birthday. That was about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, lovely. So, Trevor, you mentioned there about the scholarships. Can you tell me about that? How often are they offered, and what's the history? Have you sort of had they're always local, or what's the criteria to get a scholarship?
The criteria that we've set here, when we got the school going back in 2002, after about 3 years, we'd received quite a few grants from various organisations, from councils, from state governments, from federal bodies, and we felt that we shouldn't always just take and not give back to the community, and that's a big thing of us, is to give back to the community. And one way we thought we could do that was to offer a scholarship to youth aged 15 to 21, which would take them right through to their pilot's licence standard, which is a value of about $7,500, generally speaking. And we've been doing that on a yearly basis, except for the last couple of years where a illness has got in the way called COVID, and everyone uses that as the excuse. And the big problem we've got is getting the students to come to here because of the COVID restrictions. But our student winners have came from Warwick, Lockyer Valley, Ilmerin, Toowoomba, They're the areas that all of our student winners so far have picked up.
What sort of time would they need to set aside, do you think? What sort of commitment would it be every week or in total hours to get you to the point where you have got a licence, roughly?
Normally, we say you need to allow about 30 hours of training to get yourself through to your pilot certificate. And most people do that in about 3 to 6 months, depending on their availability, and some go as long as 12 months. Then I've got some that are 30 and 40 hours, and they've been here for 4 years and they still haven't got it because of number of constraints, family constraints, financial constraints. So it comes back to the individual, and also weather constraints. We had a young student coming here this morning, the weather wasn't nice, so she decided not to come. So she's lost the opportunity to fly today. So it varies from individual to individual. But if you can come on a regular basis of 2 to 3 days a week, you'll get through in 3 months.
Oh, right. And if you didn't get a scholarship and you were wanting to do it yourself, what sort of money would I be looking at roughly, you reckon?
Well, roughly that same figure, about $7,500.
Oh, seven, sorry,
yeah. The scholarship.
Okay, yes, yeah,
because
of course.
that's based on about 30 hours of flying training with the instructor and also flying on your own, and that'll get most people through to it. And we get some through at 20 hours, which is only $4,500, and others take longer.
Now, I did have a look at the past recipients of the scholarships, and I know obviously that they're young people. Has it been much the same between girls and boys, men and women, or what have you found?
Generally speaking, we find the ratio has been more girls getting it than boys over the years, which has been quite intriguing for us. When you consider aviation, we've only got about 5% of our pilots who are females, and we'd like to encourage female activity in basically a male domain area. And so the more females we can get involved, the better. We're not here, though, that we're saying that we need 50% females and has to be 1 for 1, no. It has to be on merit, and all the students that have got through and all the girls that have got their accreditations have all done it on their own merits of how good they've been. And so that's the big thing. We're not setting any set numbers or anything like that.
Yeah, fantastic. You're speaking my language, Trevor. I love the sounds of it. I mean, I suppose to me, in my mind, if I saw a thing for a scholarship, it's probably just that, can we do it? Are we allowed to do it as females? Or has it been traditionally a male domain? And offering that scholarship means that people have it within their grasp, I guess. Now, I also read on your website that if you're a model aircraft builder, that you often have a sort of an advantage. Does it help?
Yes, it does. Firstly, you understand the major components of the aircraft and you understand what they do, and also you have a feel from flying the model aircraft as to how to manipulate your hands and what to do as you're doing the manipulation, and the lightness and feel that you've got to use in models, and an understanding of when an aircraft does certain things, a reaction will take place. And all you're doing is transposing that pre-learned knowledge into your activity here in the real aircraft. And I've had some very good responses from model aircraft pilot over the years.
So I'm surprised by that. I thought it's a bit like those slot games outside the movies, where you put the money in and you think then you become a race car driver. Certainly my kids did anyway. And when they started driving, it wasn't quite that same experience. Yeah. So if you could have a dream about getting aviation or getting more people involved or more kids involved, what would it be? What does that look like?
Hard one to answer there. What we're trying to achieve, when you look at the federal body of recreational aviation, which is Recreational Aviation Australia, their theme is to try and get a pilot in every home. And that is to start off with the youth of today, the real young youth, and even the young children of 2 and 3 and 5 years of age around their bedroom or their lounge, flying around with a little plane or a ruler or something like that, and they're making a noise and they're emulating a plane in the air. Mentally in their mind, they are thinking they are the pilot, and you can put yourself into their seat and think they are a pilot. And that's what we'd like to think, that we could instill in them the concept of aviation, so that then as they get bigger, 8, 10 years of age, they'll get involved with maybe model aircraft or maybe even some of the computer games, which can help to some degree. And then when they get even older, that desire to hang over the fence at the Aero Club or at the aerodrome and watch the aircraft fly, and then have the opportunity to go for a fly with another pilot, to keep that activity of stimulation of aviation alive, to the point where they can then go off and actually learn to fly on their own.
So when you fly now, do you still have those sort of butterflies or that excitement that you first had? You remember when your first flight and you went up, maybe with your dad, was it?
Oh yes, well I first started flying when I was 8 years of age, not on my own, but flying with my father at that age. And then I could fly by the time I was age 15 and I was flying in a glider. So yes, I've still got these same thrills and excitements and all those things. And whenever I hear an engine and I know it's in the sky, I always look up and think, wish I was up there.
Yes, right, rather than being down here. That's
That's
interesting.
right.
So can I ask you a slightly left field one? You live out here on a farm. You grew up on a farm in the Clifton area.
That's right.
If you were a farm animal, which one would it be and why?
Well, that's a real left base one. I think one of the most enjoyable farm animals that you could have probably around the place, and I'm involved with them a fair bit at present, and that is the bird life that wanders around, particularly things like magpies and such like, and what they can do, and watching them flying. You even take it to the bigger animals, birds like your pelicans and your wedge-tailed eagle, watching them fly gracefully in the air and how they've got so much better instruments than what we've got, and how they can harness nature. And that's what a glider pilot does. He harnesses nature to keep himself aloft in the air. And that's what those birds are doing. And we always envy those birds. And that's why I think that would be an ideal thing. Best instruments out.
Oh, Trevor, that was such a beautiful answer, and so unprompted too, to say something like that, and so apt, I guess, for what you do and why we're here. Now, I'll just remind listeners that we're on 40dB Community Radio 102.7. We're in my segment called Big Little Small Talk, where we go out and interview someone interesting in the community. And Trevor, you mentioned before that you've got a pilot here, and we're going to now cross to Carol, who is learning to fly. Carol, can you give me a little bit of your history and why you're here, and when did you come, and your background?
All right, my background is I was a teacher and a scientist. I'm now retired, so I used to really enjoy travelling. I used to do a lot of overseas trips, and I always loved flying. I love being up in the air. I love the exciting part of the trip, like the takeoffs and the landings. Up in the air at cruise, that was go to sleep time. Then when COVID came along and I couldn't fly anymore, I got a bit toey, and so last year in July I shouted myself a return trip to Sydney, just so I could fly, so I could get in the air. So I just flew down to Sydney one day and came back on the one day. And then I thought, this is really silly. So I said, well, if Qantas is not going to fly me anywhere, I will just go and learn to fly myself. So my brother-in-law in Toowoomba had contact with Trevor. So he gave me Trevor's number, and I called up Trevor, and Trevor and I talked, and he basically told me the same thing as he just told you then about the process. And so this time last year, approximately, I started on my journey towards becoming a pilot.
Right. And tell me sort of some of the difficulties and some of the highlights.
All right. So, look, my journey has been an interrupted one. There's been a heap of gaps because, my mum got sick and all those sorts of things. Life gets in the road of your hobbies. And so there were substantial gaps, and then there were lockdowns. I come from down near the Amberley Air Force Base, so we get locked down on a regular basis, so you couldn't come up here when you're locked down. And then there's all these issues with bad weather. We had a lot of bad weather there, so there were these significant gaps. So it's just been a steady sort of plod along the road. And my progress was not at all smooth. It was one step forward, three steps back, and I'm afraid I wasn't the most fabulous of students. I used to do very well on the theory, but...
And now you're finally having a little bit of empathy for your students, are you?
No, I don't think so.
No. Wouldn't go that far. No, don't be ridiculous.
No, I do a bit of relief work every now and then just to finance my flying.
Yes. And so I would imagine that you're totally addicted now, are you?
I've always been totally addicted. Yeah, I love it. I still grin every time I take off. It's just such a great feeling. It's exhilarating.
Now I'm going to ask a bit of a sort of a novice question. I won't say a stupid question because they say no question is a stupid question.
Absolutely.
You don't need to own your own plane, do you?
Absolutely not. In fact, people have asked me that, what sort of plane are you going to buy? I said, I wouldn't even contemplate buying and owning a plane, because out here, I can hire an aircraft for about $150 an hour. I don't have to put any fuel in it. I don't have to pay for fuel. I don't have to pay for maintenance. I don't have to look around for a place to put it in a hangar to keep it out of the weather. I wouldn't even contemplate buying an aircraft.
Right. So they're the aircraft that are owned by the club,
Yes.
and then you can hire them. Yes.
Absolutely, yes.
And the licence that you get means that you're a recreational flyer. Is that correct? You can't like fly cargo or anything like that?
We are restricted to a maximum takeoff weight in our aircraft of 600 kilograms to 2 seats. We can only fly in Class G airspace. We're not allowed to go into controlled airspace. So there are limitations. While 95% of the airspace over Australia approximately is Class G airspace, there are areas that we can't go. So when I get my certificate, my recreational aviation pilot certificate, after that, I can do a passenger endorsement, so I need to do another 5 or so hours to get a passenger endorsement. When I do get the first stage ticket, I am restricted to flying within 25 nautical miles of my departure airport, so that'll probably get me almost to Gatton, over to almost to Warwick.
That's what I was going to ask you. So if, say, you wanted to go out to the Birdsville races for the day or something like that, what type of licence do you have to have for that?
I would need to have my cross-country endorsement. So, and then once you've got your cross-country endorsement, you can fly basically anywhere in Australia. I could go to Perth if I wanted to. Should that take my fancy anytime soon, if I didn't have to hotel quarantine. But yes, so that navigation endorsement, cross-country endorsement, allows you to fly in recreational aviation Australia aircraft practically anywhere in Australia.
Right. I remember a few years ago I took my mother out to see the opera at Jimbour House, and there were these people flying in, and we started talking to them from Maroochydore. So they'd just come over from Maroochydore, flew their plane over to the opera, and I just thought, what an exotic way to go somewhere. Just jump in a plane and go there and,
Yes. We, just in the last week, Chinchilla hosted a fly-in. So Trevor and I and 2 other aircraft from this club, as well as about another 7 aircraft belonging to club members, we all flew out to Chinchilla for breakfast.
Oh.
And it was a really nice breakfast, and then we came back home, and it was just such a great day.
What time did you get home? Lunchtime?
Oh, lunchtime, 11 o'clock, yes, I think so.
It just just sound so exotic, doesn't it? So tell me about women in aviation. Are there many like you? And what are the figures?
I know I happen to know the figures. I know that 5% of recreational aviation Australia pilots are women. I know that the industry average for commercial pilots around Australia is 5%. With Recreational Aviation Australia, however, in our junior pilots, the pilots who register as junior members of Recreational Aviation Australia, there is around about 15 to 16% of those, I might be just a little bit more, I think it's just under 20% anyway, of the junior flyers are girls. So that means that there is starting to be a trend of more girls coming through. And I think the barriers to girls learning to fly is that it's never been regarded as a girl's job. And there's still, I think, there's that perception. But in many, many fields, that these perceptions, all these science, technology, engineering and maths fields, they're all gradually changing. It's being promoted in the schools, that girls are being encouraged to do these subjects. And so, therefore, these avenues open up to them if they've got those right backgrounds.
And that's... I always say, well, everyone says about being able to see, and if they can't see women ahead of them doing it, then they can't be, and you are there doing it and then sort of leading by example. So what sort of teacher were you, Carol, before?
I was a maths and science teacher, so my principal areas were biology and chemistry, and I spent about 10 years of my life as a scientist working at the Royal Women's Hospital, which gave me some serious academic credit in the classroom. But,
what type of thing were you doing?
We were looking at I was working in a place called the Perinatal Research Centre in the Royal Women's Hospital. It was under the auspices of the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at the University of Queensland. And so basically my original study was looking at the effects of maternal smoking on infants' heart rate and respiratory rate and nervous system control mechanisms, and then moved on into looking at babies in the neonatal intensive care nursery and trying to work out reasons. Some of them developed cerebral palsy as a result of bleeds in their brain, and others didn't. So basically, yes, I experimented on babies.
Oh, well, I hope not. But it's the smoking results in lower birth weight, that's correct?
It does, yes.
Yeah, particularly. Well, you're no slouch in the academic department, obviously. And I asked Trevor that question before about do you have to have a minimum level of intelligence? But
you don't. Look, it is my absolute considered opinion that if you have got just average intelligence, you could do anything you want, provided you have the motivation and the will to work hard at it. There's been things that I've come across where I just couldn't get my head around it, but you keep at it and at it and at it and at it, and it will come. So if you have the motivation and the willingness to work, then you can achieve.
Well, that sounds like good motivational advice. I'll just remind listeners that we're on Community Radio 102.7, and we're in our segment called Big Little Small Talk, where I get to go out and interview interesting people in the community. And at the moment I'm talking to the Lone Eagle Flying School, and I'm interviewing Carol, who is becoming a pilot in her later years, should we say?
Yes. I'm retired.
Retired,
yes,
gracefully retired.
Yes.
Tell me about when you got the flying bug. Can you remember, right back when you were a kid?
Learning to fly was never a bucket list thing. I just love being up in the air. I love the feeling of it. I love looking down on the clouds. I love the look of aircraft. I would watch them fly overhead.
Did you have people in your family who loved aircraft, or did you fly at some time and then just fell in love with it? Or
No. It was never, like I say, it was never a bucket list item. It was an opportunity that was presented to me, or it was an option and an opportunity that I thought I should grab because I could.
And you told me before we started, we did something for our birthdays, and it was what?
My wonderful sons bought me a voucher to jump out of an aeroplane to do a tandem skydive.
Right.
And so I did that. It was in the same week that I got to fly solo here. And so I got to go up to Toowoomba at the Ramblers Club up there and do a tandem jump. And it was just the most exhilarating thing that I have ever done in my life. It was amazing.
Yes, we talked about it earlier, but my son wanted to do it for his 18th birthday, and I thought he must have been going with his friends, and I said, is it okay if your mum tags along? And he said, I think you and I should just do it together. And it was just such a beautiful bonding experience, and I think it must be the closest thing to being a bird, because you're just there and nothing between you and the sky.
That free fall was the most amazing thing, and
tell me, Carol, did you pay for the GoPro? Did you get the video
Yes, I got that. Well, the handy cam, yes. I didn't have the other diver jumping out photographing us from the outside, but yes, I did that. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I was too cheap to do that, and I made my son buy his own GoPro, and then of course he ended up with the good footage, and there's just no evidence that I was there at all, which is a shame.
Yes. I think I could have done around without the cheeks flapping around.
Oh, yes. That's never good, is it? No, I did.
It was worth it.
I asked Trevor a question from left field, and your question from left field is, if you could store one type of food in your pocket, what would you carry and why?
It won't store very well, but I think fruitcake would be my choice. It's got every single nutrient known to man in it. Should you be required to do a forced landing, in the sort of slices that I carry it in, and I have big pockets, it would probably last me for a couple of days if search and rescue didn't find me for a while. So
big doorstop pieces, aren't they?
I think so, yes. I think, go big or go home.
I love it. Fruitcake. Now, that was not something that I had anticipated that you were going to say. So, Carol, it's been wonderful hearing your story. I've really, really enjoyed it. You're a real inspiration. What time are we looking? When are we looking at maybe getting that license?
Look, I think probably in the next maybe 10 or so hours, or 5 to 10 hours. But it's all going to depend on. I know that I've got a big interruption coming up. There'll be 6 weeks when I don't get up here.
Okay,
So,
right.
so we'll
It'll just depend.
It's just going to depend.
Yeah,
and like I say, I've travelled this journey. It's been a long one. It's been sometimes very difficult, sometimes demoralising, sometimes absolutely amazing. But I would not have not done it for the world.
Oh, that's great.
And I have to just put in a plug for my wonderful instructor. So Trevor has been.
Not too bad.
He has been fabulous. Yes.
Great. Yeah. Well, that's a good
Most
endorsement for
time.
you, Trevor. So that'll most of the time, she says. That'll take me back to you, Trevor, because I want to finish off. One of the reasons I've come out to interview you is because you are a 40dB community sponsor. Can you tell me about why you believe in community radio and why you're a sponsor of 40dB?
Well, once again, it goes back to what I'd said earlier in the interview, where our club's trying to give back something to the community. And that's one of the things that we felt that we could do, was to become a community sponsor and look after the community. If we don't have community radio and community sponsors, we're not going to have a good radio service at all. And one of the things that we've always felt is that strength of bonding that we're trying to see between our flying school and our club, and also community radio. And that's the big aspect that I'd like to take away from it, is that bonding that we've got.
Well, you couldn't have said it better. I think the 40dB tagline is, it's your local station that's been loving you back for 4 decades. And Trevor, you said it in a beautifully succinct way. So thank you. And thank you for being my guests on Big Little Small Talk this morning.
Pleasure.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you, Megan.
That's it for this week. Thanks for joining me on Big Little Small Talk. I hope you can make the time to join me next week. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favourite podcast app.